Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. I haven't done one of these discussion videos in quite some time, just because with all the events of this year, there haven't been a lot of new movies or TV series that have really caught my attention. But we are exactly a month away from The Mandalorian Season 2, so I thought I would kind of review the first season and then give you my thoughts on what's going to happen in Season 2. Just as a fair warning, if you haven't seen the first season, I am going to be discussing a lot of spoilers, so I highly recommend that you stop the video, go watch all 8 episodes back to back to back to back to back, and then come back and finish the video. So, The Mandalorian Season 1, obviously the biggest thing that came out of that was the child, which is, colloquially referred to as Baby Yoda, which is inaccurate, but whatever, it makes it easy for people to remember, because we've now seen a total of 3 of Yoda's species. So Yoda himself, obviously, the child, and then if you remember back in episode 1, one of the other Jedi Masters was Yaddle, who is also of Yoda's species. In addition to seeing another of Yoda's species, we saw some interesting Force abilities, one of which we also saw then in The Rise of Skywalker, which was Force healing. Force healing has been something that existed in Star Wars lore for as long as I can remember. It was never really seen in the movies or in the TV series like Clone Wars, Rebels, etc. up until now. And it was kind of nice to see that because, again, it's something that had existed in canon for so long, it never really was confirmed. We also, of course, met the Mandalorian himself, played by Pedro Pascal, who we later find out is named Jin Jurin, if I'm saying that correctly, who appears to have grown up during the Clone Wars. His planet came under attack by droids, and his family was killed, unfortunately, but a group of Mandalorian soldiers were there, and they took out the droids and then adopted him, as is the Mandalorian custom. That's one of the big things about this series that I was really satisfied with, is how they took a lot of the old expanded universe canon for Mandalorians and brought it back into the fold. Because the Mandalorians had a huge amount of canon established in the old expanded universe between novels and comic books and whatnot. And then when Disney took over, a lot of that got dumped out. So I'm really happy to see that Disney is bringing some of that stuff back. One of the most important pieces, in my opinion, which was brought back in The Mandalorian, was the Beskar, which Beskar is Mandalorian iron, and when it's forged correctly by a Mandalorian smith, it can, 1, deflect actual blaster bolts and stuff, and 2, it actually is able to resist lightsabers, which, again, this is kind of going into the old expanded universe. I'm not sure if it's going to be canon anymore, but that was basically what happened in the Mandalorian Wars back, this was during the Old Republic, when the Mandalorians almost took over the galaxy, because the Jedi Knights at the time, went to fight them and try and, they thought, oh, it's going to be easy, lightsabers and all that, and they found out quickly that Mandalorian armor actually does resist lightsabers. So in addition to that, we met Greef Karga, played by Carl Weathers, who was I guess, informant for the Bounty Hunters Guild. He basically issued the Mandalorian his missions and then contacted him on, any other jobs that he might have. And a really kind of interesting character development there as well, because he, the Mandalorian kind of burnt the bridge with the Bounty Hunters Guild by not delivering the child, or rather delivering the child and then stealing him back. But then Greef Karga, of course, by the laws of the Bounty Hunters Guild, has to try and hunt him down. Well, later on, he gets injured, and the child kind of heals him and saves him, and he kind of has a change of heart. He's like, wait, maybe I need to actually help the Mandalorian out with this guy. Really kind of an interesting character change there. Then we also meet Cara Dune, played by Gina Carano, I hope I'm saying that right, who is a former Rebel shock trooper, kind of trying to hide from her past, probably dealing with a lot of PTSD. So she's on this kind of backwater world, just kind of wants to get away from the world, but the Mandalorian finds her and tries to encourage her to help him against, the Imperial Remnant, who's trying to track him down because he broke a contract with them, and they want the child back. He also meets an Ugnaught named Kuiil, who, as far as I'm aware, this is the only Ugnaught that actually has speaking lines, which I thought was kind of interesting, because you see Ugnaughts in Empire Strikes Back as kind of the, labor force, whatever you're going to call it, in Cloud City, and you don't really learn much more about them. Through Kuiil, we kind of learn a little bit more about Ugnaught culture as well, which was really interesting, how they were not necessarily enslaved by the Empire, but forced into indentured servitude. And one of the things Kuiil is really proud of is that he paid his family's, contract, and he's a free man, basically, or free Ugnaught, as it were. and he helps the Mandalorian in his search for the child, basically. And then later on actually gives his life to try and save the child, which is a really, really sad scene. He's voiced by Nick Nolte, I forgot to mention that, who again does a really fantastic job. Then there's also IG-11, who is a bounty hunter droid, who the Mandalorian meets on his mission to initially find the child. And initially, the IG-11 droid is programmed to kill the child, so the Mandalorian shoots IG-11, destroys him, but Kuiil actually comes back, rebuilds him, and reprograms him to be something of a kind of badass nanny droid. And so later on in the series, the Mandalorian entrusts the child to IG-11, who protects him as best as he can, but they get in a situation where the only way forward is for IG-11 to sacrifice himself by blowing himself up and taking out a bunch of stormtroopers. And again, it's a really sad, emotional scene, but just exceptionally well acted. IG-11 was voiced by Taika Waititi, who also directed at least one or two of the episodes. There's also an entire Mandalorian enclave, which I thought was really fascinating, because you got to see just different types of Mandalorians, from the heavy gunner guy to the more pistolier, jetpack swooshing around, and of course the armor Mandalorian herself, who seemed to be the leader of that enclave. Really a fascinating character, even though she only had a few scenes and a few lines. Really kind of gave a whole new level of mystique to the Mandalorians, and I really hope that they continue with that trend. And then probably the last important character that we encounter is Moff Gideon, who's played by Giancarlo Esposito. Again, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. Who's an Imperial Moff with some sort of vendetta against the Mandalorian. I'm not entirely sure if it's solely related to the child, because he brings basically an entire battalion of troops with him to assault the Mandalorian and try and retake the child. Which is really kind of overkill in my opinion, but then again, stormtroopers are stormtroopers, so they're not exactly competent. But the series basically ends with his TIE fighter going down and him cutting out a doorway for himself to escape using the Darksaber, which the Darksaber has existed in Star Wars canon for a very long time. It was kind of brought back into the fold again in the Clone Wars and Rebels, because it's basically a Mandalorian artifact. It's a lightsaber where the saber is actually black, so it's kind of inverted. It's very just fascinating history behind it. How Moff Gideon wound up with it is anyone's guess, but my assumption is that he may have been in some sort of position of power during the sieges of Mandalore, when the Imperials again invaded and tried to take all the Beskar. I'm not sure if that's canon or not. That was kind of the old lore. Basically what happened was the Empire, heard about Mandalorian iron and how their armor was incredibly durable. It could deflect against blaster bolts and resist lightsabers and things like that. So the Empire invaded Mandalore, and basically the Mandalorians weren't too keen on that, and so they fought back, but the Empire just had overwhelming force and kind of scattered the Mandalorians to the winds. And then they strip mined the planet. Well, what happened was they didn't realize that Mandalorian iron had to be forged in a specific way to get those properties out of it, a way that only Mandalorians knew how to do. And so here they were sitting on this mountain of Beskar and could do literally nothing with it, which is why the character, I can't remember his name, played by Werner Herzog, who gives the Mandalorian the mission to find the child, offers him Beskar, because they have this huge pile of it they're sitting on, they can't do anything with it. So it's a very kind of interesting contrast there. So anyways, that's kind of a mix and match review of Season 1. Hopefully it made some sort of sense. So with Season 2 coming out, they did release a trailer. I'll put the link in the description if you haven't seen it yet. It's interesting. The trailer honestly doesn't give us that much. It kind of reminds us of where we left off in the first season, where basically the armorer Mandalorian tells Din Djarin, the Mandalorian main character, that he needs to return this child to his people, which in this case means the Jedi, because it's kind of the Mandalorian code, I guess, that you either adopt the people into your family and they become yours, or you return them to their family. In this case, because again the child obviously is going to outlive the Mandalorian by quite a lot, the Mandalorian armorer basically tells him to return him to his people and try and find the Jedi. So it's going to be really interesting to see who returns, if they're going to bring us a new Jedi, which is kind of what I'm hoping, just because I like that The Mandalorian has kind of distanced itself from the established lore, the established canon, the whole Skywalker shenanigans, because we need to get away from that. I know a lot of people are talking that maybe Ahsoka will make an appearance, and so I have to say I'm not a fan of the Clone Wars, I'm not a fan of Rebels, but I will say that Season 7 of the Clone Wars kind of did redeem itself a little bit. It took itself seriously, and that was great. But I just think that as much as people would love to see Ahsoka in live action, I think we need to get away from that. I think we need to have a new character and establish some new lore using the Mandalorian as kind of a segue for that. Obviously, Moff Gideon and Darksaber are going to have some sort of comeback. What exactly that means is anyone's guess. Again, we saw him cut his way out of his TIE fighter with a Darksaber, which is, again, an important Mandalorian artifact, so at some point those things are going to come to a head. Whether or not that's going to be early on in the season, or if that's going to be kind of another season finale, who knows? The trailer honestly doesn't give us much. Some of the planets seem recognizable. I believe we saw Tatooine based on the Tusken Raider and the Bantha, which would make sense because, again, that's kind of where a lot of the crime was organized under the Hutt family. But keep in mind, this series does take place after Return of the Jedi, so Jabba the Hutt is dead. So it's possible that there's some sort of power vacuum there now, and there's multiple factions vying for power. Maybe the Mandalorian heads there to try and get some information. I'm not entirely sure. It's also interesting because the trailer shows in a couple scenes there's X-Wings flying on the side of the Razor Crest, but also behind it. Now, it's possible that the Mandalorian's getting into trouble with the New Republic, but I'm kind of hoping that, and again, I'm a little bit of an optimist in this respect, I'm kind of hoping that the New Republic will see that the Mandalorian is kind of running into trouble with the Imperial Remnant, and maybe that they're actually going to be supporting the Mandalorian, which I think would kind of be a cool twist on things. Again, I'm an optimist in that respect. It's likely not going to happen. I would really like to see more Mandalorians. Seeing the Enclave in the first season was really cool, and the armor in particular, I really enjoyed that character. So I'm hoping that we'll see more of that. Maybe they rebuild the Enclave on a different planet or something. I'm not really sure how they would continue that, but I think that would be a really interesting thing to see. There's also been rumors that Temuera Morrison, who played Jango Fett and then all the clones, was cast for some role in Season 2. And I don't know if that was ever confirmed or not, but a lot of the speculation would be that he would probably be playing Boba Fett, which again, in the old expanded universe, he goes into the Sarlacc pit in Return of the Jedi, but he blows it up and escapes and continues to fight on for quite some time. I don't know if, again, that all the old expanded universe was thrown out, so I don't know if they're going to be bringing that back in, because I think that would be awesome, because Boba Fett is the quintessential Mandalorian. He made the armor famous, he made the Mandalorians famous, in Return of the Jedi especially, so I don't really know exactly how that would work, but that would be my guess if Temuera Morrison is coming back. I really would like to see more of the New Republic, more of the Imperial Remnant, because again, that was something that was heavily covered in the old expanded universe, and in this new canon, I guess we could say, that we're trying to establish, there's not a lot of information on it, and I'm hoping that they would give us some more information in that regard. I'm curious to see, too, if they ever touch on the unknown regions. Again, this is going back to old expanded universe, but there was a huge section of the galaxy that was just labeled the unknown regions because there hadn't been hyperspace lanes established yet. So there's a lot of crazy stuff that happened in there, sentient planets just being one of the things. So it's possible that there's something there that could be related to the Jedi. Now that I'm thinking about it, I believe they touched on that in The Rise of Skywalker, because I think the planet that what was it, Exegol or whatever, where the Sith fleet was, I believe that may have been in the unknown regions, and that's why it took that Sith holocron thing to be able to guide and navigate into there. So I don't know. I think it would be really interesting to see. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this discussion. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like I said, we have a month until the first episode comes out, so there's a lot of time to discuss. If you enjoy the video, hit the like button. That helps me out immensely, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. That way you can see my videos as soon as they appear. And we will see you all in the next video.